All right, this SAG-AFTRA WGA hot strike summer news is hot off the presses, and so I want to speak with studio level writer, producer, and director Evan Mirzai. Evan, thank you for joining me on such short notice. It is always great to hear from you on these strike updates.
I appreciate that, Dan. Thanks for always having an ear out for us and giving us a platform to give our kind of POV from the inside. Thank you.
Oh yeah, no, workers' rights and solidarity forever, and twice on Sundays. So can you
Absolutely.
break down what this newest SAG-AFTRA is? SAG-AFTRA is the Screen Actors Guild. Put a gun to my head. I'm not sure I can tell you what the AFTRA means, but I know there was like a union of the two unions.
It was their like a sister union, and they merged about 15 years ago to simplify, kind of like how the WJ East and West are two separate unions but still act as one.
Yeah, that's it's good information for myself and also for the audience. But what is the latest news for folks you can tell? And yeah.
Sure. I'll give kind of like an aerial view of what's going on. So basically, there are three major unions, and by saying that already, I probably pissed off the Teamsters and IATSE, but forgive me, everyone. For the sake of conversation, it was the WGA negotiation first with the buyers, then the Directors Guild, the DGA, followed up by the Screen Actors Guild, which their negotiation period has just culminated in a strike. So every 3 years, Hollywood does a collective bargaining agreement negotiation with the buyers, much the same way the major sports leagues do. It's the players and the owners. Here, it's the talent and the buyers. And we're at an impasse historically where the studio system itself is over 100 years old. Technology changes every day, including things like AI now taking over not only entertainment jobs, but grocery store jobs, banking jobs, etc. It's a pivotal moment. I like to tell people that we're living in the 1920s all over again. We're going through or came out of a global pandemic. We're already in a world war. As much as anybody doesn't want to admit it, it's a smaller scale, but you would still definitely call this World War III. What we're seeing on, Russia, Ukraine, etc. But now we need to reset our own labor environment the same way as reset in those 1920s. So very long story short, this was the last domino to fall today. The Screen Actors Guild, I think, made a very bold and necessary choice to stand up to, the bosses. I was very impressed with Fran Drescher's speech today announcing the strike, where she, as a, seemed like a normal citizen, anybody could be saying what she was saying. We've been pushed to the brink. We are being victimized by antagonistic and greedy bosses, and it has to stop. So I think I'm rambling at this point, but I think that's a good intro to where we're at.
No, I think it's real great, and I think when people it's important to kind of frame that a lot of what we believe with Russia and Ukraine is like a proxy war between these. Vladimir Putin kind of sees it very openly as a continuation of the Cold War. I think the United States is treating it in a closed way, a continuation of the Cold War, especially when you see the saber rattling with China. So, like, it's a very, you don't hear that all the time, but I think that's an important context to bring it at, because I think in media, we also we think of, the Roaring Twenties, like Gatsby is a little bit the later end of it, but like this sort of celebration of excess. And in my like sort of hacky way of bringing it back to TV, you sort of see it in shows like White Lotus and Succession that are bringing a lot of attention from regular folks and also like the critics, because it's this period we're in where even though very few of us have access to decadence, and that gap between decadence and poverty or even being in the working class is like further and further than ever, widening every single day, as we talk about in a lot of outlets, we still have this like fascination with it. And it's in that, I think for a lot of people, we've talked in this conversation before and we were on the street with much worse audio, but everyone still loved it. It all kind of worked out. But we are kind of seeing that, when I've been on the strike lines a couple times with you even, you see people honking, and it's not just like blue-haired people driving electric or hybrid cars. Like you see, to be stereotypical,
Workers.
like cis men with trucks who are like blaring their horns and stuff. And so I think you're seeing that, unlike the trope that I think to bring up Disney CEO Bob Iger saying that writers and actors are not being realistic and that the idea that they're striking is disturbing to him. I think a lot of workers who even don't work in Hollywood, who, even though Hollywood oftentimes gets demonized in a number of different ways in society and in politics, regular workers are like, yeah, F that mess. I have solidarity with workers because I see the struggle they're going through. So would I be correct in saying that similar kind of dynamic is spreading throughout SAG-AFTRA, or like, are they both just very strong, like, unions that generally work together? Like, have they, like WGA, do they have a history of striking in the past?
Yeah, so actually, the last time the writers and the actors were on strike at the same time was 1960. So we're already looking at 62, 63 years ago. And that was a very important strike because it ended up giving us our residual system and actually started our pension, health, and welfare funds, which obviously we fight for and need to this day. So the guilds are independent, but their actions to me are resulting from the same, let's just call it hot mess that late stage capitalism has given us and put us in. So what I like to think of it right now is your everyday worker, your 9 to 5er, has been seeing frozen wages, skyrocketing inflation, every economic barrier possible. But the actors in particular have always been the face of Hollywood, right? They've always been glorious and had the best lifestyles, and they've jetted here and there, and they have expensive cars and houses. It's to the point now where even the actors are on strike because they have been squeezed to the brink. So what I'm getting at here is that society at large, I think we're going to talk about this a little later, society at large, especially the United States, everyday Americans, they have been left behind by the economic system. Everything else has skyrocketed, record profits every year in every industry, and you can only take so much before the people say no more.
Yeah, I was just reviewing some news right now on my Twitter feed where, this is the big Oppen Barbie weekend, and
Right?
you are seeing now that we have solidarity, especially with the Screen Actors Guild. Just as Oppenheimer was premiering in the UK, you have, it's not really loading right now, but basically the actors just like walked out of that UK premiere just immediately in direct solidarity
Yep.
for this thing. And so like, yeah, I,
Those are union members.
I think you're very right to point out. It's very exciting to me as we get into some of the broader things. I don't want to skip too far ahead here, but as we get into some of the more broader aspects of other workers striking, as you mentioned, like even mentioning a big three unions like get some heads. Like you gotta shout out IATSE, gotta shout out Teamsters that directly relate to Hollywood efforts and shows and sets and shoots. But also there's the Teamsters working with UPS right now who are getting ready to strike. You have hotel workers who are striking. LA is a port city, as a lot of people forget, and the port of LA and Long Beach also has Teamsters who are talking about different striking. Like, as we've been talking about, there have been really good journalists like Paris Marks who have been covering the strike wave as it's happened year by year. And Paris has been very careful, and other journalists have been very careful saying like, oh, it's not like general strike levels yet. We can't like convince everyone to like tomorrow leave your jobs out like seriously risking like a small percentage of people's like livelihoods. But every single year, more and more people are striking. And so I guess like to get a little bit ahead of things, even though I promised I wouldn't, like as you see hotel workers striking in Los Angeles, similar picket lines, like as you see UPS workers, how are you feeling both like from your perspective in Hollywood, but also like your perspective as a worker, your perspective as someone who is just like walking around and seeing all this labor power at
As
once?
an American,
Like, yes. as a red-blooded American.
exactly.
Yes.
That's right. So the WGA actually was striking in solidarity with the hotel workers at the Fairmont Hotel recently. And to talk about UPS, let's start there for a second. UPS, I want to start there. So UPS itself is actually, in my opinion, and probably everybody else's, probably Amazon's biggest asset at this stage. Obviously they ship with FedEx and USPS as well. But this is an industry that is basically much like the laborers in Hollywood is being taken advantage of for maximum profit from their owners. And there needs to be strike after strike after strike for change to get to that, what we're talking about, general strike wave. I've been hearing people, like Bob Iger has a great resume, has built a great company. I bring that up because to kind of say, his quote in the article today was that, we're just coming out of a pandemic. Now is not the right time to strike. I think that the pandemic, how unsettling it was for everything, how much it shut down, the norm for Americans, it made us realize that you can strike and you won't be destroyed, which is a big trick that the American financial and economic system has perpetrated on our people, is that, oh, if you strike, you're going to be fired, you're going to lose your livelihood. If anything, Europe shows us that when you strike, you get what you want. So when they say like, oh, now is not the time to rebuild during a pandemic, I think now is the time to do it because everything has been shifted off kilter anyway. Why not make things better while we're in this sort of reset period? So that extends to not just our industry, but UPS as well as the hotel workers. The bottom line is no one is getting paid enough in any industry. Most of the owners are getting paid way too much. You see year after year things like record profits in every industry. I say to myself, and I'm not sure I'm quoting the numbers exactly, but let's just say Jeff Bezos was $150 billion. I think that he had that number somewhere. I could be wrong, or supposed to be recording live, whatever. But if some of these owners gave up, let's say 20% of their giant bag of Smog the Dragon Light gold, then they would still have a mountain to live on and live well. So there can be a great middle class for every industry, and there can be super exorbitant owners. It doesn't have to be turned to the max. We need to turn that volume down. You do that by striking.
I was just looking here, and there are a bunch of, you can slice Jeff Bezos' salary like any number of different ways, because it's like, oh, he only takes this small number of amount. That doesn't count for the stock he owns, or doesn't count for any of his other investments, right? But yeah, like, it's ultimately... I had a point up here from Bob Iger, and I referenced this earlier, where he was complaining about disruptive forces, and that, listen, we have to accept the disruption. Things aren't going back. I understand labor's desire, but we've managed before and we'll manage now. It's just like completely not realizing that Disney, and specifically their shareholders, like the people who profit off of Disney, got so addicted to the Bob Iger cash that when they were making like N-1 of what they were making when Bob Iger was there, once he retired, they like overthrew his replacement. The shareholders were like, no, let's get the old guy back because I'm used to N. I'm used to N plus 1 I'm used to N plus 0.00001 every single quarter, and god damn it, I'm going to continue getting it. And so, like, those are the forces you're getting here, is that it's really raw greed that doesn't, I think it was either you or, like, I think a lot of people talked about this the last time I was at a strike, but, yeah, I think it was definitely you. These CEOs look at it as numbers on a spreadsheet, as opposed to the reason why those numbers in the spreadsheet go up. There are flops here and there, of course, but like the reason why those numbers really go up are because of artists, and they're because of creators and the way they've been doing it, not to be, old fashioned, but, one of the top blockbusters of the year is going to be releasing with a lot of explosions and not a lot of CGI. And like, that is done with creatives. That's done with work. That's done with very little more than like what's standard modern necessary computers. And these CEOs tend to believe that, oh, these disruptances are happening, meaning like AI and other technologies can continue to squeeze out workers. And I think you see this in statements from SAG-AFTRA, you see this in statements from WGA. People are rebelling against that.
Yeah, and let's talk about this too in particular. Since we're on Bob Iger and Disney, they're just such a large part of the conversation. Bob Iger's tenure goes back to at least I could be wrong, but the late '80s. He was at ABC. Comes from sports before that. Was at TV, and then obviously rose to take over the whole studio. His annual salary, I think last year, is $27 million. What the WGA is asking for Amazon to pay us in our collective bargaining negotiation is $32 million for a year. So Bob Iger, one man alone salary could almost cover exactly what we're asking for from Amazon, an entire studio. And we're forgetting the fact that Amazon itself makes billions of dollars in profit every year. What is $32 million there? People will say, oh, it's crazy, it's just greed, and most of it is greed. I still think that's where we get inflation from. I still refuse to say inflation. I still call it greedflation. But everybody at that level's view of what's acceptable profit-wise is so out of whack that it needs to be refreshed. It's too bad it's happening every 100 years, it looks like, in this country. Maybe we'll have a great labor movement in 2120. But for now, we need to strike across the board.
Let's talk about, when we're talking about across the board and like unity, even when we're looking at Hollywood, there's a little bit of a different playing field. It's like there was like a joint letter in support of the WGA strike, released by, I have it up on the screen here. I get it, bada bing. And you can see it has Writers Guild, East and West, WGA, as I said, IATSE, DGA, and Teamsters. But DGA has recently sort of like negotiated a contract with was it AMPTP?
Yeah, the AMPTP. That's the collection. It's the group that the buyers, the studios use to negotiate as one unit.
Right. And so do you feel that there is a sort of tension? Like again, like they signed onto this letter recently, like today, as the time we're recording, July. Actually, no, this was yesterday. So like July 12th. It's July 13th when we're recording, and but they like the DGA have made a deal and they've already made their agreement. So like, have you seen or sensed any tension in the ranks? This letter would seem to suggest otherwise, but of course you're on with the ground more, so I'm interested in kind of what you're seeing, because that's very different. The DGA made a deal with these big production companies, whereas
With the buyers,
yeah, some could see that as like a lack of solidarity or less solidarity, or like maybe DGA could have gotten more for if like they joined the picket lines directly. That being said, like they are joining the picket lines directly in solidarity. Where are you seeing this?
So let's put it this way: had the DGA rejected the deal that they were offered and gone on strike, I believe that the entire process of the WGA getting their deal negotiated, the SAG, Screen Actors Guild getting their deal negotiated, would have ended quicker. Just because if you had all unions in solidarity, you can't really fight that. Unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at the deal, the DGA did make that deal, and I think that they kind of took the think of it as like three kids in a family. One can always sit out and let the other two kind of handle business, and it'll be fine for them either way. In this instance, I think that's what they've kind of done, is that they said, we're going to take care of the best we think we can get right now, and then we will support WGA and Screen Actors Guild and what they do, to which they are still doing now. But that said, everybody would have preferred if there would have been a total unity across all three major unions.
I mean, everybody would have preferred it, but ultimately DGA like members voted to like approve their contract. So
yeah, and to your question about how was it on the ground, I should answer that. I'm sorry. Internally, I know DGA members, and then publicly on Twitter, you see DGA members who were urging their fellow members to reject the offer placed in front of them by leadership. Just because the union leadership puts the offer in front of the body, it still has to be ratified. The vote was ratified. It was passed. We take whatever we can from support from our friends and fellow unioners, whether they're in a deal or not, their support on the lines, which DGA has given.
Word, yeah. So, I mean, it seems it's an interesting wrinkle there, but I think in real strategizing, like sometimes you get different wrinkles in there, and as is through like the live episode, that there's a lot of like context about what are the lines you draw and what are the times you're being strategic. Like that's a whole different like conversation. But
yeah.
I think when it comes to the actual actions and the actual work, like we said, DGA is continuing to show unwitting, at least at this point, unwitting solidarity with the other unions of Hollywood that are striking. And so we have reason to believe that, like, yeah, I think, as you're saying, like, I think a lot of people would have preferred if there was this like complete unity and complete solidarity through it. But you can still find that in actions and in accountability, DGA is still able to be a useful force there. Because again, like you can't have the directors, right? You can't have the directors do like stage man. I would love to see Christopher Nolan as a grip. Like I would love that.
Let's be fair to Christopher Nolan. His reaction to HBO and AT&T putting Tenet as a day and date movie, which resulted in him moving from Warner Brothers to Universal as a director. That reaction, I think, dwarfs, or maybe I'm saying this backwards, he took it really well today that the actors left during the premiere. I would have thought that maybe based on, his passion for the project, that might have superseded, but I'm very proud of his reaction to that. But let's talk next steps of where we're going from here.
Totally.
You mentioned wrinkles. I want to talk about a positive wrinkle here. The writers, directors, and actors, our responses to the buyers right now kind of makes it clear to people what the pecking order is in Hollywood. So as a writer, myself, my fellow writers, we are always looking at ourselves as the people who create the project. Nothing starts without the writer. But then you can't really sell a project without a director, or probably more importantly, a star. So people can name their favorite directors. People are less quick to name their favorite writers, but everybody knows their favorite actor. So what we're looking at now is the power of actors influencing the zeitgeist and culture and bringing out their fans. The next step here beyond strike for us, because there's talk that what we're actually facing is a lockout from the buyers and not a strike, which if that's how they want to play it, fine. it's going to make everything longer anyway. But what I'm getting is the next step of this strike needs to be boycotts. And so writers can get out there and say boycott Netflix or boycott HBO all they want. Even directors can say it. Nobody's really going to give, any care about that unless, Leo comes out and says, boycott so-and-so, then people will listen. So the buyers, I think, are playing a very dangerous game, risking alienating their talent. And now we've got talent on the front lines. And I'd love to see how both sides are affected by those appearances.
I love the idea of Leonardo DiCaprio in Wolf of Wall Street, but instead he switches the line and goes, "We're fucking leaving."
Yeah, exactly right. And he's an environmentalist. I think he's got very progressive ideals. I'm not sure where he stands personally. He's been in the town a long time, and so we'll see. But yeah, it's a whole new ballgame now that SAG has entered the field. I put a funny tweet up the other day that Screen Actors Guild joining the Writers Guild on the picket lines would form the Megazord that we need. And so I put a little power up there of Power Rangers, and I thought it was fun. But that's kind of where we're at now. We've got reinforcements, and I'm very proud of our sister union and can't wait to see the damage they do.
Yeah. As sort of a follow-up to that, you sort of answered this question in that there's now star power with SAG-AFTRA involved in this fight. And if there is, Megazoid, like extreme, like super deluxe solidarity, then hypothetical Leonardo DiCaprio or like those actors and actresses who like will bring that star power to the cause can also incorporate what the hotel workers are working on, what the Teamsters are working on, what fast food workers are doing, especially today. I think there's a fast food worker protest in downtown Los Angeles as well. Then Yahtzee, it's way even better, right? But the studios are responding with, we've said this a lot. It was like, we can keep this strike going. But ultimately, embedded in this is a power conflict and a power dynamic. And that power dynamic is the C-suite has a lot of money, and they control the flow of money, essentially. And the creators, the content creators that allow that excess, that largesse to be achieved by those like bean counters and suits is lacking for those same creators. Like in easier terms, right? They have the big CEOs and the finance people, they have the money and they control where it goes. The writers and the directors and even the actors, and it's like some of the big name actors, they're like patted on the head because they're like the faces but the directors and the writers a lot of times, especially the smaller ones, are not making that bread. And so their response is just a material condition. We'll starve your asses. Like their response has been, as you've seen in the past couple of days, like, well, okay, they want to wait it out. That's our game too. We just have more ammunition being money. They're not throwing it at them. They're not using it as an offensive thing, but they can wait it out because they have more resources. I mean, that ultimately seems to fall down a little bit when you figure the fact that like Bob Iger is not gonna fly over to Emeryville and go like, all right, this is how we're gonna save Pixar. Like,
yeah,
I got some ideas. I'm gonna spitball in the rim, right? Like ultimately that's not gonna happen.
It's a total paper tiger. It's a total paper tiger. So here's how you know that. Let's just for the audience real quick. What Dan is talking about is the night of the expiration of the Screen Actors Guild's negotiation window with the buyers. It was released that the buyers are prepared to at least starve out the writers and wait us out until October, with the theory being that a 5-month strike would bankrupt writers. The joke is on them because they've already created a system where every writer can thrive in a bankrupt environment to begin with. They make us wait forever for our payments anyway. When we get them after negotiation, they're lower than they should be anyway. So that already in itself is a false threat. But you can tell that statement is total, bullshit because of the date of its release. If they were really serious about waiting us out until October, they would have told us that when we went on strike May 2nd. It's a scare tactic at the last minute, and it didn't work. SAG didn't blink, and we look forward to the next, threat and proof of their inhumanity that they want to put forward publicly.
I love that. It's good in a PowerPoint to have a little bit of a shoo that fly. Fuck it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly
literally,
right.
Is this your king? That's what Evan just did with me. It's like, really? Is this all you got? Yeah. And I still feel like, there's, again, this is a pure feeling, like you're on the ground there, but like there will be struggles and there will be like, it's going to be tough to make ends meet for a lot of people, not everyone. Like you said, this is an environment to where we're already surviving off scraps. All right. If you're telling us to continue surviving off scraps, we'll make it work. All right. but that's still very hard and that's still very difficult for a number of people. I think based on what I heard, I haven't been on the strike lines in about a month or so, just like dealing with some personal stuff. But like what I heard the first 2 months of when I was there was like, oh yeah, we're prepared for this to go indefinitely. We did not go into this with anything like, oh, they'll buckle in a week, they'll buckle in a month, they'll buckle in 2 months. Like, no, we care about this so much. It is this important that we understand the sacrifices in doing this indefinitely, and we've made our peace with it, and we're coming back with that peace with like 10 times more vengeance. Does
Yeah.
that seems to be what I got from like your previous statement? Does that seem to be your feeling on the ground about
Yeah.
other folks? Like, has that resilience gone away?
No, it hasn't gone away because I will tell you, like many people come to Hollywood physically to pursue their dreams as a writer, director, actor. Many people, for whatever reason, don't make it and wash away, go back to where they're from, or change fields or whatever. The ones who have stayed long enough to get their guild cards and carve out any bit of a living and able to give you the hope to continue is here for the long haul, even during the best of times. So this is more. I don't want to get too into it, but you look at the Vietnam War, a big reason why the United States, lost was because they didn't know the lay of the land. You could say the same thing about the Revolutionary War. So the buyers do not know how shitty it is out here for us. I forget where I heard this before, but recently there was some sort of CEO who went to Mexico and ordered an ice cream, and the person said it was 25, and he tried to pay $25 instead of giving the kid 25 pesos or whatever it was, cents. So there's just a total out of touchness from the buyer's side that we have, quite frankly, let get out of control by not striking before. A good example of our power lies in the Writers Guild's action against the agencies before the pandemic, where we single-handedly ended the TV packaging system, almost up to the Supreme Court. It became a federal case, and that was another game of attrition where the Writers Guild had to negotiate one by one with each agency until the system was reformed for the better. If that's what it takes now, we'll do it. But the bottom line is nobody wants to go back to the way work has been. The pandemic made us realize just how fragile everyone's careers are, whether you're, middle class or, God forbid, lower. And then at the same time, now that I mentioned that, I do, before we get off track, want to make a point here that this is also a strike meant to improve the lives of what are called BTL workers, below the line workers. Hollywood refers to quote unquote talent as above the line and the crew as below the line, which I would argue is at least needs to be everybody's on the same damn line. But below the line workers are going to get hurt and have been hurting, dearly during the strike because production has gone away. But all I can say to those who are, trying to, get through is that this is a necessary reset to make sure the rest of your life is better than it is now or has been. And for me, that's a choice that is not easy to make, but one that I've made, and I'm out there on the lines with everybody for that same purpose.
Oh yeah, I'm interfacing with people who are like, oh, I would love to get back with you on this, or like I'm waiting on a paycheck because of the strike and because of all these things that are going on. And like those are material things that suck, but at the end of the day, they understand why it's happening and they understand it's a very noble reason, and there's sort of like a mutual understanding in Hollywood. Like that the mutual understanding in Hollywood doesn't pay rent, but I think it's an important thing that's there because especially with material conditions, with work, with fighting directly against capitalism, like not to get all like typical Berkeley grad on the Mario Savio shit, but like literally putting your like bodies on the gears of the machine to stop it. Like it takes sacrifice, right? But I think yeah, like you're saying, and it's some good heartwarming news to hear that folks understand a little bit of that sacrifice and they're willing to make it because, like you said, these stakes are that high, and winning, which is a necessity because you just cannot replace these workers, is like winning will allow the art that everyone cares about, both consumers and those who produce it, from the below the line, quote unquote, to above the line. It allows this art to thrive for all the people involved in it. And I think that's like what makes it really crucial, and that's why.
That's well said. I agree with that, and I'll just add, a lot of the writers on the line and now soon-to-be actors and those who have struck in the past, even though we're in Hollywood and our creatives, we're still, some of us, activists. I came to the industry not only to make my art, but to hopefully, help make an impact or a difference in people's lives for the better. And I like to think that writers, actors, directors, we produce a product that helps people escape the day-to-day, whether that's, a bad job, a bad family situation, health situation, etc. At least, for me, from personal experience, movies and TV were my way of like relaxing. If they're even taking that away from the people now, it's enough. Like no matter what your field, whether you work at a grocery store, you're a laborer, a driver. I mean, like we can go on a whole political thing here, but like the truckers for Trump, I hope they realize how bad a choice that was when Trump turned around and slashed all of their tax incentives and really ruined their way of business. What I'm getting at here is that from any field of life in the United States, labor has been crushing the employee, and workers need a reset, and we need a better way of life. And if that means taking away our labor, then that's what it is. And here we are to do that.
It's very well said on you. And you were saying that like I had said it well. I was just repeating back what you had said and like the way I'd understood it. So I always appreciate having you on for these updates. Evan Mirzai, studio level director, producer, writer, great friend of mine, and someone who has really got his finger on the pulse of a lot of these things happening in Hollywood labor. And I really appreciate having you on. It's been sort of like a monthly occurrence now, so I think like your monthly strike update is something I definitely enjoy. And yeah, when you get off of the social media feeds, you get off of whatever like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk are doing with their platforms and like whatever Spill or Blue Sky or whatever competitors there are to that. They're just like real ass workers fighting for better material conditions, and that is a little bit heartwarming when there's a lot of hell going on. So thank you for bringing a little bit of that into my life. Thank you for taking the time out to inform the audience about this, and we're talking again soon, definitely.
I appreciate it, Dan, from the internet. Thanks for having me. Keep up all the great work, and then we'll hit the lines whenever you feel like covering actors in person. But I'm here for everything.
As soon as they start air conditioning those lines, I'll be right out there with. No, I'm kidding. Okay. I'll definitely
we'll talk
be there.
Soon, Dan.
Yes. Peace.
I'll keep you posted.